She worked in a small bistro that sat quietly on the corner of a busy street. People passed by it every day without really noticing it, but inside, it was always full of soft noise. The sound of plates touching tables, the low talk of customers, and the smell of fresh food filled the space from morning until late night. She had been working there for more than a year, and most days felt the same. Her job was simple. She took orders, carried food, cleaned tables, and smiled when needed. She was good at her work, but she never stood out. People did not remember her name for long. To most customers, she was just the waitress who came quickly when called and left just as fast. She never complained, even when the restaurant was crowded or when she had to stay extra hours. At the start of her shift, she tied her apron neatly and adjusted her hair in the small mirror near the staff room. She looked at herself for a moment, not with pride, but with a quiet, tired understanding. Life had become routine. Wake up, come to work, serve customers, go home, sleep, and repeat. There was nothing surprising in her days anymore. But there was something people did not know about her. Something she kept hidden deep inside. It was not something she talked about, not even to the people she worked with every day. Years ago, before life became heavy with responsibilities, she had been close to something different. Something that made her feel alive in a way she could not explain easily. When she was younger, she had once touched piano keys with curiosity. At that time, she did not understand music fully, but she understood feelings. Every note she played made her feel like she was speaking without words. For a short time in her life, she had dreamed of playing more, learning more, maybe even performing one day. But life did not stay gentle for long. Things changed, and she had to leave that part of herself behind. Now, those memories only came in small pieces. Sometimes when she passed by a shop and heard soft music, she would slow down without knowing why. Sometimes when the cafe radio played an old piano melody, she would pause for a second too long before returning to work. She never told anyone about these moments. She believed they belonged to a past that no longer mattered. The bistro where she worked had a piano in the corner. It was old and mostly ignored. Most customers did not even notice it. It was covered with a thin layer of dust, and only a few times had someone touched it just for fun. For her, that piano was something she avoided looking at directly. It was as if it reminded her of a version of herself she had left behind. Her coworkers were kind enough, but everyone was busy in their own way. One of them often joked to keep the mood light during stressful hours. Another always worried about time and orders. They all worked like a team, but nobody really talked about personal dreams or hidden feelings. Life was too fast for that. One evening, the bistro became unusually busy. More customers came in than expected. The kitchen was loud, and the wait between orders felt longer than usual. She moved quickly between tables, trying her best not to make mistakes. Her feet hurt, and her hands were tired, but she kept going. At one table near the window, a small group of customers sat quietly. They were different from the usual crowd. They spoke softly, observed the place more than they talked, and seemed less interested in food and more in the atmosphere around them. She did not pay much attention at first. For her, every table was the same. Take order, deliver food, move on. But something changed when the cafe speakers began playing soft piano music. It was a simple piece, nothing dramatic, just calm notes flowing one after another. Most people barely noticed it, but she did. She stopped for a second without realizing it. The tray in her hand felt slightly heavier. Her steps slowed. It was not loud, but it touched something inside her that she had not felt in a long time. For a brief moment, the noise of the bistro faded in her mind, and only the music remained. She quickly shook the feeling away and continued working. She reminded herself that she had tables to serve and no time to get lost in thoughts. Still, something about that melody stayed with her longer than expected. The group near the window noticed her small pause. One of them observed her carefully, as if trying to understand what had just happened. She did not notice their attention. She was already moving to another table, smiling politely as always, hiding everything behind a calm expression. Later that night, when the rush slowed down, She went to clean the table near the piano corner. The area was quiet now. Most customers had left or were finishing their meals. The bistro felt calmer, like it was finally breathing after a long day. As she wiped the table, her eyes accidentally moved toward the piano. It was still sitting there silently, waiting for nothing. She looked away quickly, but her hands slowed down. There was a strange pull, something she could not explain easily. It was not strong enough to force her to do anything, but it was enough to make her pause again. She told herself it was just a normal instrument. Nothing more. Still, her thoughts lingered for a moment longer than she wanted. After finishing her work, she returned to the staff area. She removed her apron and prepared to leave. Her body was tired, and she wanted nothing more than rest. But even as she stepped outside into the cool night air, the sound of that piano music from earlier came back into her mind. She walked home slowly, passing streetlights that flickered gently. The city was quieter at night, and that gave her space to think. But she did not want to think too much. Thinking often brought memories she preferred to keep buried. Still, that evening felt slightly different. Something small had shifted inside her, even if she did not fully understand it yet. It was not excitement or fear. It was something softer, something like a forgotten feeling trying to wake up again. When she reached home, she sat near the window for a while before sleeping. The night was calm, and the world outside seemed far away. She thought about the piano in the bistro without meaning to. She remembered how the notes had briefly changed the way she felt. Just for a moment, she had felt something she thought was gone. She closed her eyes and tried to rest, but sleep did not come quickly. Her mind stayed quiet, yet alert, as if waiting for something unknown. She did not know it yet, but this ordinary day had started something small. Something that would slowly grow in ways she could not predict. And somewhere deep inside, the part of her that once loved music had not disappeared. It was only waiting. The next morning arrived like any other day, quiet at first and then slowly growing louder as the city woke up. She opened her eyes early, even before her alarm. For a moment, she just lay still, staring at the ceiling, trying to push away the heavy feeling in her mind. The night had not been restful. Her sleep had been broken by small fragments of dreams she could not fully remember, only feelings that stayed behind like echoes. She sat up, rubbed her face gently, and looked toward the small window beside her bed. The light outside was soft and pale, not yet strong enough to fill the room. It felt like the world was still deciding how the day should begin. She got ready slowly, the same way she always did, but something inside her felt slightly different. It was not a clear emotion, just a quiet awareness she could not ignore. At the bistro, everything was already in motion when she arrived. Chairs were being arranged, tables cleaned, and the smell of fresh ingredients came from the kitchen. The place always felt alive in the morning, like it was preparing itself for another long day of serving people who came and went without thinking much about the place itself. She tied her apron and started her routine. Wipe the tables, check the orders, help in the kitchen when needed. Everything was familiar. Everything was expected. But still, her mind was not fully settled. She kept thinking about the piano from the previous night. Not in a loud or emotional way, but in small flashes. The sound of the notes. The way she had paused without meaning to. The strange feeling that followed her even after she left work. She tried to ignore it, but thoughts like that do not leave easily once they settle in. The morning rush began, and she became busy again. Customers came in groups, some in a hurry, some relaxed, some distracted by their phones or conversations. She greeted them politely, took orders, and moved between tables with practiced ease. From the outside, nothing looked different about her. She was still the same calm, quiet waitress doing her job. But inside, something kept shifting in small ways. At one point, while carrying a tray, she heard a faint sound from the cafe's background music system. It was another piano piece, softer than the one from the night before, but still enough to catch her attention. Her steps slowed for just a second again, just like before. She did not stop completely this time, but her focus shifted slightly away from her work. She placed the tray down carefully and forced herself to move on. There was no reason to get lost in music, she told herself. It was just sound. Nothing more. Still, her attention did not fully return to normal. During a short break later in the morning, she stood near the service counter, pretending to organize napkins. Around her, coworkers moved quickly, talking about small things, work schedules, and orders. Their voices were normal, casual, but she only half listened. Her eyes drifted again, without permission, toward the corner where the old piano stood. It was still there, quiet, unchanged, waiting like it always had been. She looked away quickly, almost as if someone might notice her staring. But no one did. Everyone was busy with their own tasks. Still, something about that piano felt different now. Not because it had changed, but because she had. The memory from the night before returned again. Stronger this time. The moment she had paused while hearing the music. The way something inside her had reacted before she could control it. She did not understand why it stayed with her so clearly. It was just a short moment. A few seconds at most. But it felt longer inside her mind. She shook her thoughts away and returned to work. By midday, the bistro was full again. Noise filled every corner. Plates clinked. Chairs moved. Conversations overlapped. The air felt warmer and heavier. She moved faster now, adjusting to the rush. She had no time to think about anything else. But sometimes thoughts do not ask for permission. At one table, a customer casually mentioned how the place had a piano but never used it. It was said lightly, almost as a passing comment. But she heard it clearly while passing by. She did not react outwardly, but her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the tray she was holding. She continued walking, but the words stayed behind in her mind. Never used it. She had never thought about it like that before. To her, it had always just been part of the background. Something decorative, something forgotten. But hearing it described that way made it feel slightly different. Like something unused was also something waiting. She quickly pushed the thought away again. The afternoon was slower. The rush calmed down, and the bistro returned to a softer rhythm. She used the quieter time to clean and prepare for the evening. Her movements were automatic, but her mind was not fully calm. Every time she passed near the piano corner, she felt something small inside her shift again. Not strong enough to stop her, but noticeable enough to make her aware of it. At one point, she paused near it while carrying a cloth. She did not touch it. She did not sit down. She only stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Her eyes moved over the surface of the piano. Dust had collected lightly on its top. The keys were hidden under a closed cover. She imagined, without meaning to, what it would feel like to open it. That thought made her uncomfortable, so she stepped away quickly. Evening slowly approached, and the bistro prepared for another busy cycle. Lights were adjusted, menus checked, and staff gathered their energy for the night rush. She felt tired already, but she knew the hardest part of the day was still ahead. As customers started arriving again, she returned to her routine. But now, something had changed slightly in how she moved. Not visibly to others, but internally. She was more aware of sounds around her. More aware of pauses between conversations. More aware of music when it played. It was as if her senses had become more sensitive without her permission. Later, while clearing a table, she heard a customer nearby mention music lessons. It was a simple conversation, nothing directed at her. But it made her pause just a little longer than usual. She placed the dishes more slowly than needed before moving away. She did not know why these small things were affecting her so much. The night deepened again, and the bistro became less crowded. The familiar quiet returned in small waves. She looked forward to the end of her shift, but at the same time, something inside her felt unsettled. Like there was a question forming in her mind that had not been fully spoken yet. Before closing time, she found herself once again near the piano corner. This time she was not cleaning. She was just passing by, but her steps slowed again. She looked at it for a longer moment than before. The room around her continued normally. People spoke, Chairs moved, orders were finished. But her attention was somewhere else. It was not about the piano being special. It was about the feeling it brought back. A feeling she had almost forgotten existed. She finally looked away and continued her work, but something had changed slightly inside her. Not in a dramatic way, not in a sudden realization, but in a quiet, steady way that would not disappear easily. That night, when she left the bistro again, the air felt colder. The streets were quieter. She walked home as usual, but her thoughts were not as empty as before. For the first time in a long time, she found herself wondering something she had avoided for years. Not what she was doing with her life, but what she had once stopped doing. And that question, simple as it was, stayed with her longer than she expected. The next day did not begin peacefully for her. Even before the sun fully rose, she was already awake again, sitting quietly on the edge of her bed. The room felt still, but her mind did not. It was like something inside her had started moving and refused to stop. She tried to convince herself that it was nothing important. Just thoughts. Just random feelings from a tiring job and long days. But deep down, she knew it was not that simple anymore. When she got ready for work, everything looked normal from the outside. Same uniform, same routine, same walk through the familiar streets toward the bistro. People passed by her without noticing anything different. But inside her, there was a slight pressure she could not ignore. A kind of quiet curiosity mixed with hesitation. She reached the bistro earlier than usual. The morning setup had already started. Chairs were being placed, tables wiped, and soft conversations filled the air. She joined in like always, but her movements were slightly slower than usual, as if part of her attention was somewhere else. And it was. Her eyes kept drifting toward the same corner again. The piano corner. She did not want to look at it, but her thoughts kept pulling her there. The old piano stood silently as always. Nothing about it had changed. It was still ignored by most people. Still covered with quiet dust. Still part of the background that nobody truly paid attention to. But for her, it was no longer just background. The morning passed in a familiar rhythm. Orders came in. Food went out. Tables were cleaned. Customers came and left. She did everything correctly, but there was a small distance between her actions and her thoughts. Her mind kept returning to moments she had started remembering without trying. The sound of piano music from the cafe speakers. The brief pause she had taken days ago. The strange feeling that had stayed with her longer than expected. She had always believed memories fade when you stop feeding them. But this one felt like it was becoming clearer instead. During a short break, she sat alone near the staff area. The noise of the bistro softened for a moment. She held a glass of water but did not drink it right away. Her eyes were unfocused, lost in thought. One of her coworkers passed by and asked if she was feeling tired. She quickly nodded and gave a small smile, pretending everything was normal. And it was easier that way. Easier than explaining something she did not fully understand herself. After the break ended, she returned to work. But something changed during the afternoon shift. The cafe music system played again. Another piano track. Different from before, but still soft and emotional in tone. And again she felt it. That small pause inside her movement. This time she did not stop completely, but her pace slowed just slightly. It was enough for her to notice it herself. That bothered her more than she expected. Why does this keep happening? It was just music. Just sound. Nothing more. But her body was reacting before her thoughts could stop it. As the day moved forward, the bistro became busier again. But now, she was more aware of everything around her. Not just sound, but details she usually ignored. The rhythm of footsteps. The way people tapped their fingers while waiting. The pauses between conversations. And especially the quiet corner where the piano sat. She noticed how often her eyes went there without permission. Not long, not obvious. Just quick glances that she tried to hide from herself. By late afternoon, something unusual happened. A small group of customers arrived and sat near the piano corner. They were chatting casually, laughing softly, enjoying their time. Nothing special at first. But one of them eventually looked at the piano and made a comment about how it looked like it had not been played in a long time. She was nearby when she heard it, and something inside her tightened slightly. Not pain, not fear, something closer to recognition. She continued her work without reacting, but the words stayed with her longer than they should have. Not been played in a long time. It was not just about the piano anymore. It felt like the words were also pointing toward something else. Something inside her. The evening came slowly, bringing the usual rush of customers again. The bistro filled with noise, movement, and energy. She moved through it like always, but now her attention kept splitting in small ways. Half of her was working, the other half was thinking, and the thoughts were becoming harder to push away. At one point, while carrying plates to a table, she passed directly by the piano. It was closer than usual. She had walked past it many times before without feeling anything unusual. But this time her steps slowed slightly again. She did not stop, but she felt it. A pull. Not physical. Something quieter. Something inside her mind asking for attention. She quickly continued walking, almost as if escaping from her own thoughts. Later that night, when the rush began to slow, she found herself again near the piano corner while cleaning nearby tables. This time she was not avoiding it as strongly. She was still hesitant, but less distant. Her cloth moved across the table slowly. Her eyes stayed lowered at first. But then, without fully deciding, she looked up. The piano was right there, closer than it had felt before. She stared at it longer this time, and for a brief moment, she imagined something she did not expect. She imagined sitting there, just sitting, not playing, not performing, just sitting in front of it. Her mind created the image so clearly that it surprised her. She could almost feel the weight of her hands resting above the keys. The thought made her heart feel slightly uneasy, so she quickly looked away. But it was too late. The image had already formed, and it stayed. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of routine tasks and repeated movements. But her awareness had shifted permanently now. She could feel it. Something had changed in how she saw the place. The piano was no longer invisible. It was present, real, waiting. When her shift finally ended, she removed her apron slowly. She felt more tired than usual, but not just physically. It was a deeper kind of tiredness, like her thoughts had been running even when her body was still. She stepped outside into the night air. It was cool and quiet again. The streets were less crowded now. The city felt calmer, but her mind was not. She began walking home as she always did. But this time, she was not thinking about finishing work or resting. She was thinking about something else entirely. Why does it feel like I remember something I never fully lost? The question repeated in her mind as she walked. She did not have an answer. But for the first time, she did not push the question away immediately. She let it stay. The night around her moved quietly. Lights flickered softly. A few distant voices came and went. Everything looked normal, unchanged. But inside her, something had already started shifting in a way that could not be reversed easily. And without realizing it yet, she had already stepped closer to a moment that would soon change everything she believed about herself. The next morning, she woke up earlier than her alarm again. It was becoming a pattern now, even though she did not want it to be. Her body felt rested, but her mind did not. It was as if her thoughts had continued moving all night without her permission. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, staring at the floor. The room was quiet, but inside her head, it was not. There was a strange mix of hesitation and curiosity she could not separate. Yesterday's thoughts were still there. The piano, the feeling of being drawn toward it, the questions she had started asking herself without answers. She stood up slowly and got ready for work like always. Same routine, same steps. But now, something small had changed in how she moved. She was not rushing away from thoughts anymore. She was walking alongside them, even if she did not fully understand them. When she arrived at the bistro, the day had already begun its usual rhythm. The smell of fresh bread, the sound of chairs moving, and the soft voices of staff preparing for customers filled the space. Everything looked normal from the outside. But she noticed it differently now. The piano corner. It was the first thing her eyes found when she entered, even though she tried not to look at it directly. She pretended to adjust her apron and started her work quickly. Still, she knew it was there. The morning passed with its usual flow. Customers came in, ordered food, ate, and left. She served them politely as always. She smiled when needed, nodded when required, and kept moving. But her awareness was no longer fully inside her tasks. Kept drifting. To sound. To space. To that quiet corner of the room. At one point during the morning rush, a customer asked casually if the piano in the corner ever worked. It was said lightly, almost as a joke. She was passing by, carrying a tray, and heard it clearly. She did not stop, but something inside her tightened again. It was not discomfort exactly. It was recognition, as if the question was not just about the piano, but about something else she had been avoiding. She placed the tray down carefully and walked away, but the words stayed with her longer than they should have. By midday, the bistro became louder again. Orders increased, and the kitchen became busier. She moved faster, keeping up with everything. But her mind was no longer fully controlled by routine. Small thoughts kept slipping in between tasks. What if I just look at it properly? That thought came suddenly while she was wiping a table. She paused for a second, realizing what she had just thought. Then she shook her head slightly and continued working. No, it was better not to think like that. But even as she tried to ignore it, the idea did not disappear. It only moved quietly to the background, waiting. Later, during a short break, she sat near the staff area again. She did not speak much. She just rested, holding a glass of water. Her coworkers talked around her, sharing small updates and jokes, but she only listened partially. Her eyes, once again, drifted toward the main dining area, and then toward the corner. The piano corner. She saw it clearly this time, even from where she was sitting. It looked the same as always. Old, quiet, and used. But now it no longer felt invisible. Felt present. Like something that had always been there but was only now becoming real to her. She quickly looked away and finished her break. The afternoon shift started again, and she returned to work. But now something inside her had shifted further. The hesitation she once had was slowly turning into awareness. She was not just avoiding the piano anymore. She was noticing it every time she tried not to. It was strange. The more she ignored it, the more it stayed in her mind. As the afternoon progressed, the bistro became quieter for a while. Fewer customers, softer noise. The kind of calm that usually allowed her mind to rest a little. But not today. Today, the quiet made her thoughts louder. She found herself standing near the piano corner while clearing a table nearby. Her movements slowed again without intention. She finished wiping the table, but instead of moving away immediately, she stayed there for a moment longer than necessary. Her eyes lifted slowly, and she looked directly at it. The piano. No distraction this time. No movement around her pulling her attention away. Just her and the instrument. It was the longest she had looked at it in days. Something strange happened in that moment. Not outside. Nothing visible changed. But inside her, a feeling rose quietly. Not strong. Not overwhelming. Just steady. It felt like remembering something without fully seeing it. Her hands paused midair. She was still holding the cloth, but she forgot to move it for a moment. She imagined sitting there again. Not playing. Just sitting. The thought was clearer this time. More detailed. She could almost feel the distance between herself and the keys. The stillness of the chair. The silence around it. She blinked and quickly looked away. Her heart was slightly faster now, though she could not explain why. She told herself to focus on work. And she did. But something had already changed. The piano was no longer just an object in the room. It had become a question. One she could not ignore anymore. As evening approached, the bistro started filling again. The familiar rush returned. Plates, voices, movement. She went back into her rhythm, trying to stay focused on her tasks. But now, even while moving quickly, her awareness did not fully leave that corner. It stayed nearby, watching, waiting. At one point, she passed directly beside the piano while serving a table. The distance between her and it was small, close enough to reach out if she wanted to. She did not, but she felt it more strongly than before. A quiet pull, not forceful, just present, like something gently reminding her of its existence. She walked past it quickly, almost as if afraid that stopping for even a second would change something. Later, while clearing another table, she overheard a small comment from nearby customers talking about unused things in life. It was not directed at her, but the timing felt strangely connected. She did not react outwardly, but inside, she felt the words settle somewhere deep. Unused things. The phrase stayed with her, even after the customers left, even after she cleaned the table, even after she moved away. As the night deepened, the bistro slowly began to quiet down again. The rush faded. The atmosphere softened. She found herself near the piano corner once more while finishing closing tasks. This time, she did not stop immediately when she reached it. She slowed down naturally. Her eyes lifted, and she looked at it again. But this time something was different. She did not feel like she was avoiding it. She felt like she was facing it. For a brief moment, she stood still. No movement around her felt important. No noise distracted her. Just that silent instrument in front of her. And something inside her that had been quiet for years felt like it was starting to wake up slowly. Not fully. Not loudly. Just enough to be noticed. She took a small breath and stepped back, breaking the moment before it could grow further. Then she continued her work. But as she finished her shift that night and stepped outside, the feeling did not leave her like before. It walked with her. The night air was calm again. The streetlights glowed softly. People passed by without noticing her. But her thoughts were no longer as quiet as they used to be. And deep inside, she now knew something she had not fully accepted before. The piano was not just part of the cafe anymore. It was becoming part of her story. The night after that shift felt different to her. Even though she returned home, ate something simple, and lay down like usual, sleep did not come easily. Her body was tired, but her mind stayed awake in a quiet, restless way. She kept seeing the same image again and again. The piano in the corner of the bistro. Still, silent, waiting. It was strange how something she had ignored for so long had now started appearing in her thoughts without effort. She did not try to think about it, but it came anyway, like a memory that was slowly returning, piece by piece. At one point in the night, she even sat up in bed, unsure why she could not relax. The room was dark and calm, but her thoughts were not. She pressed her hand lightly against her forehead and sighed. "What is happening to me?" she whispered softly to herself, though there was no one to answer. Eventually, she lay back down and forced her eyes closed. After a long time, sleep finally came, but it was not deep or peaceful. It was filled with faint sounds of piano notes, unclear faces, and feelings she could not name. When morning arrived, she woke up feeling even more tired than before. But something inside her was no longer as heavy. Felt more like curiosity now, mixed with hesitation. She got ready slowly and went to work again. The walk to the bistro felt familiar, but her attention was different. She noticed small things she usually ignored. The sound of footsteps behind her. The wind brushing against leaves. The way sunlight touched the road. Everything felt slightly more alive than usual. When she reached the bistro, she paused outside for a moment before entering. That was new. She never used to hesitate before stepping inside. She took a small breath and went in. Inside, everything was already moving as usual. Staff preparing tables, kitchen getting ready, early customers settling in. The same world, the same routine. But her eyes, without permission, went straight to the corner again. The piano. She looked at it for a second longer than she meant to. Then she quickly turned away and started working. But this time it was harder to fully ignore it. The morning passed slowly. She served tables, cleaned spaces, and helped wherever needed. But in between all of it, Her thoughts kept returning to that corner more often than before. It was not loud. It was not distracting in a dramatic way. It was more like a soft pull at the back of her mind. At one point, while carrying plates, she passed close to the piano again. She slowed down for a moment without realizing it. Her eyes moved toward it briefly, then away again. But that brief look stayed with her longer than it should have. During a short break, she stood near the staff counter, resting her hands lightly on the surface. Around her, people talked, laughed, and moved quickly. Life in the bistro was always active, but she felt slightly separate from it now. Her attention was divided. One part of her was still doing her job. The other part was quietly thinking about the same thing again. The piano. She tried to distract herself by focusing on small tasks. Folding napkins, checking supplies, adjusting trays. But even while doing those things, her mind kept slipping back. Later that afternoon, something unexpected happened. The cafe's background system played a soft piano piece again. It was gentle, slow, and emotional in tone. The kind of music most people would hear while eating without thinking too much about it. But for her, it was different now. The moment it started, she stopped what she was doing for just a second. Not completely frozen, just a small pause, like her body recognized something before her mind did. She quickly continued working, but her heartbeat felt slightly uneven. Why does this keep affecting me? The question returned again, but there was still no answer. As the day went on, she noticed something new. It was not just the piano itself anymore. It was anything related to it. Even the word music felt different when she heard it in passing conversation. Even silence near that corner felt heavier. She did not understand why this was happening, but she could not ignore it anymore. By late afternoon, the bistro became quieter for a while. Fewer customers, softer noise. She used the moment to clean tables and prepare for the evening shift. While wiping a table near the piano corner, she slowed down again. This time, she did not look away immediately. Her eyes stayed there for a few seconds longer than before. The piano looked the same as always, but she was not the same as before. Something inside her had changed in small steps over the past few days. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, like water filling an empty space. She finished cleaning the table but did not move away immediately. For the first time, she stood closer without feeling like she needed to escape. Her thoughts came quietly. What if I just try? The thought surprised her. She stepped back quickly as if the idea itself was too strong. No, not now, not here. But even as she rejected it, the thought did not disappear fully. It stayed somewhere in the background. The evening rush started again. Customers arrived, the bistro filled with noise, and she returned to her usual rhythm. But now her awareness was sharper. She noticed the piano more even when she was not looking at it. It was strange, as if it had become part of her attention without permission. During a busy moment, she passed near it again. The sound of plates and voices surrounded her. But for a second, everything felt slightly distant. Just her and that corner again. She did not stop, but she felt it more strongly this time. Not a pull. Something closer to recognition, like something inside her saying, "You have been here before." She quickly moved on, shaking the feeling away, but it stayed with her longer than she wanted. Later that night, as the shift began to slow, she found herself cleaning near the piano corner again. This time, she was more aware of her own movements, more careful, more conscious of where she stood. She wiped the nearby table slowly, then paused. Her eyes lifted, and she looked directly at the piano again. This time, she did not immediately turn away. The silence around her felt deeper than usual. The noise of the bistro faded slightly in her awareness. Even though it was still there, she stood still, just for a moment. No one noticed her pause. No one interrupted her. It was only a few seconds, but it felt longer inside her mind. She imagined sitting there again. Not playing anything complicated, just touching the keys. One note, then another. That simple thought made her chest feel slightly tight, but not in a painful way. more like emotion trying to rise without words. She quickly stepped away before the feeling could grow further. But something had already changed again. Now it was not just curiosity. It was becoming something closer to choice. When her shift finally ended that night, she removed her apron slowly. Her hands moved more thoughtfully than usual. She was not rushing to leave. For a moment, she stood in the staff area without moving. Her coworkers were still talking and finishing their tasks, but she was quieter than before. Her thoughts were not loud, but they were steady. She stepped outside into the night air. The street was calm again. The same path, the same lights, the same quiet city. But she was no longer the same person who had walked this path days ago. As she began walking home, one thought stayed with her clearly. Not fear, not confusion, something else. If I keep ignoring it, will it always stay there? She did not answer herself. But for the first time, she did not push the question away. And somewhere deep inside, the piano was no longer just an object she avoided. It had become something she could not stop thinking about. The next morning arrived with a strange calmness. She woke up before her alarm again, but this time she did not feel as heavy as before. It was not complete peace, but something softer, like her mind had stopped fighting the same thoughts over and over. She stayed in bed for a few moments, looking at the ceiling. The room was quiet, but her thoughts were not confused anymore. They were clearer now, more focused. The piano was still there in her mind, but it no longer felt like something strange or distant. It felt close. She slowly got ready for work. Her movements were steady, but different from before. There was less hesitation in her actions, even though she still did not fully understand what she was feeling. On the walk to the bistro, she noticed the usual things around her. People passing by, shops opening, morning sounds filling the streets. But her attention was calmer now. She was not running away from her thoughts anymore, but she was also not chasing them. It felt like she was walking with them beside her. When she reached the bistro, she stopped for a second outside the door again. This had become a habit now without her realizing it. She looked at the entrance, took a small breath, and stepped inside. Everything inside was already in motion. The staff preparing for the day. The smell of fresh food. The familiar sound of dishes and voices. It was the same place she had worked in for a long time. But now she saw it differently. Her eyes naturally went toward the piano corner. She did not rush to look away this time. She just looked. The piano stood there as always. Quiet. Still. Waiting. But now, instead of avoiding it, she felt something else. Calm acceptance. She started her shift like usual. Taking orders. Serving tables. Moving between spaces. Everything looked normal on the outside. But inside, something had changed in how she moved through the day. She was more aware of the piano, but not afraid of it anymore. It was no longer just a forgotten object in the corner. It felt like a question waiting to be answered. The morning passed smoothly. Customers came and left. Conversations filled the air. She did her work carefully, but now her mind was not splitting into confusion like before. It was quieter, more focused. During a short break, she stood near the staff area again. This time, instead of avoiding thoughts, she allowed herself to notice them. She thought about the past few days, how she had first started noticing the piano again, how music had affected her unexpectedly, how something inside her had reacted without explanation. She did not fully understand it yet, but she no longer wanted to push it away. That alone felt different. Later, during the afternoon, the bistro became less crowded again. The softer hours returned. She found herself naturally moving toward the piano corner while cleaning nearby tables. Her steps were slower, but steady. She reached the table beside it and stopped. For a moment, she did not do anything. She just stood there. The piano was closer now than it had felt before. Her eyes stayed on it longer than usual, and this time she did not immediately look away. Her breathing remained normal, but her thoughts were very clear. She remembered how it felt the first time she reacted to the music. Not fear, not confusion, something deeper, something familiar. Her hand still held the cleaning cloth, but she was not focused on it anymore. She took a small step closer. Then another. She was now standing directly in front of the piano. The moment felt quiet, even though the bistro was still active behind her. She looked at the keys. Covered. Silent. Waiting. Her fingers moved slightly, almost without her permission. Not touching yet, just hovering near the edge of the piano cover. Her heart beat a little faster, but she did not step back. She stayed. For a long moment, she did nothing. Then slowly, carefully, she lifted the cover. The sound of it opening was soft, almost unnoticed in the background noise. And there it was. The keys. Simple. Familiar. Waiting in silence. She stared at them. Her thoughts did not rush this time. There was no confusion, no panic, just awareness. She remembered something she had almost forgotten for years. Not a full memory, just a feeling. Her hands slowly moved forward. She hesitated for only a second. Then she placed one finger gently on a key. A single note sounded. Clear, soft, real. The sound spread into the room quietly, blending with the atmosphere of the bistro. It was not loud enough to disturb anyone, but it was enough for her to hear it fully. She paused. Then another finger moved. Another note. This time she did not stop immediately. Her fingers began to move slowly across the keys. Not a song. Not something planned. Just simple, careful sounds forming one after another. She was not performing. She was listening. For the first time in a long time, she was not thinking about work or time or what others might see. She was just there. In that moment, a few customers nearby noticed the sound but did not interrupt. Some turned their heads slightly. Others continued eating but listened quietly. The bistro did not become loud or chaotic. Instead, something unusual happened. It became still. Even people talking lowered their voices without realizing it. She did not notice all of this at first. Her focus was fully on the piano. The more she played, the more natural it felt. Her hands were not perfect. There were pauses, small hesitations, but none of that mattered. It was not about skill. It was about something returning. Something she had left behind without realizing how much it meant to her. As she continued, her expression slowly changed. Not dramatically, but softly, like something inside her had started to settle. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was simply reconnecting with something she thought was gone. After a few moments, she stopped playing. Her hands rested gently on the keys. Silence returned. But it was not empty silence. Felt full. She slowly lifted her hands away and sat still for a moment. Her eyes stayed on the piano. And for the first time, she did not feel like she was standing next to something or she felt like she had returned to something familiar. Behind her, the bistro slowly returned to its normal activity. But something had changed in the atmosphere. People did not forget what they heard. Even if they continued their meals, something in them had paused for a moment. She gently closed the piano cover. Not to hide it again, but to rest it. She took a step back. Her hands were slightly trembling, but not from fear. From emotion she had not felt clearly in a long time. She looked around the bistro again. The same place, the same tables, but now it felt slightly different. And then she understood something quietly. It was never just about the piano. It was about the part of her she had stopped listening to. That evening, when she finished her shift and walked outside, the air felt different again. But this time, it was not confusion she carried with her. It was awareness. The city lights were still the same. The streets were still the same. But inside her, something had reopened gently. Not fully formed. Not complete. But real. And as she walked home that night, she no longer asked herself why the piano had affected her so much. Instead, she started to wonder something else. What if this is only the beginning?